I woke up that morning to find my snow machine bone dry, and I knew exactly who had done it. My name is Aaron Ellsworth, and I have lived in Fairbanks, Alaska, for the past 8 years. I moved here from Wisconsin because I loved the cold and the isolation, and I had always dreamed of living somewhere I could truly appreciate winter. What I did not appreciate was the Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association, specifically their president, Deborah Patterson, who made it her personal mission to control every aspect of life in our small subdivision just outside the city limits. The morning started like any other late January day in Fairbanks. The sun would not rise for another few hours, and the temperature sat at a crisp -20 degrees. I had planned to take my snow machine out to check on my ice fishing spot about 15 miles north of my property. The machine, a brand new Yamaha Sidewinder that I had purchased just 3 months ago, was my pride and joy. I had saved for 2 years to afford it, and I kept it in pristine condition. I walked out to my detached garage, my breath forming thick clouds in the Arctic air. The garage door creaked as I lifted it, the cold making everything stiff and resistant. That is when I noticed something was wrong. My snow machine sat exactly where I had left it the night before, but something felt off. I approached it and checked the fuel gauge. Empty. Completely empty. I stood there for a moment, confused. I had filled the tank just yesterday afternoon, planning for today's trip. 20 gallons of premium fuel gone. I checked the ground beneath the machine for any signs of a leak, but the concrete floor was dry. No puddle, no smell of gasoline lingering in the air stronger than usual. Someone had drained my tank. My mind immediately went to Deborah. 2 days ago, she had stopped by my house to inform me that snow machines were not supposed to be stored in garages that faced the street, even though my garage was at the side of my house and barely visible from the road. She cited some obscure HOA regulation from page 47 of the Covenant, Conditions, and Restrictions document that nobody had actually read in full. I told her politely that I would look into it, but I had no intention of moving my snow machine to appease her ridiculous interpretation of the rules. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 3 houses down. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Aaron, it is 6 in the morning. What is going on? Someone drained all the fuel from my snow machine. Did you hear anything unusual last night?" There was a pause, then I heard him moving around. "Actually, yeah. I heard a vehicle around midnight, maybe a little after. I looked out the window and saw headlights near your place, but I figured it was you coming home late." "I was home by 9. What kind of vehicle?" "Could not tell for sure, but it looked like an SUV, white or light colored." "Deborah drove a white Cadillac Escalade." "Of course she did." I thanked Marcus and hung up. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed proof. I went back into my house and reviewed the footage from my security camera. I had installed one 6 months ago, pointed at my driveway and the side of my garage. The camera had night vision, and as I scrolled through the footage from the previous night, I found exactly what I was looking for. At 12:17 in the morning, a white Escalade pulled into my driveway. The video quality was not perfect, but it was clear enough. Deborah got out of the driver's seat, wearing a heavy parka and carrying what looked like a fuel canister and a siphon hose. She spent about 15 minutes in my garage, then loaded the canister, which now appeared heavy and full, into the back of her Escalade before driving away. I sat back in my chair, stunned by her audacity. This was not just an HOA violation dispute anymore. This was theft. I saved the video footage to 3 different locations, including a cloud backup, then called the Alaska State Troopers. Fairbanks had a local police department, but since we were technically just outside city limits, the troopers handled law enforcement in our area. Trooper Wilson arrived about 40 minutes later. He was a tall man in his late 30s with a thick beard that helped protect against the cold. I showed him my garage, the empty Snowmachine tank, and then the security footage. He watched it twice, making notes in a small notebook. "You are certain that is Deborah Patterson?" he asked. "Absolutely. That is her vehicle, and you can see her face when she turns toward the camera at the 2-minute mark." He nodded slowly. "And you had how much fuel in there?" 20 gallons. "I filled it yesterday afternoon at the fast fuel on College Road. I have the receipt." I pulled up the digital receipt on my phone, showing the timestamp and the amount. Trooper Wilson photographed it with his own phone. "Here is what is going to happen," he said. "I am going to go have a conversation with Miss Patterson. If she has your fuel, and if she cannot provide proof that she purchased it herself, we will have grounds for theft charges. In Alaska, stealing fuel is taken seriously, especially in winter when it can be a matter of life and death." I appreciated his straightforward approach. "What should I do in the meantime?" "Do not contact her. Do not go to her house. Let me handle this officially. I will call you after I speak with her." After Trooper Wilson left, I tried to go about my normal morning routine, but I could not focus. I made coffee, stared at my computer screen pretending to work on some freelance graphic design projects, and checked my phone every few minutes. The sun finally rose around 10:30, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. Fairbanks in January was beautiful in its harshness, all white and blue and gold. My phone rang at 11:15. "Trooper Wilson." "Mr. Ellsworth, I need you to come down to the trooper station on Pedger Road. Miss Patterson is here, and there are some developments you should be aware of." The drive to the station took 20 minutes. The roads were icy, and I took it slow despite my eagerness to find out what had happened. When I arrived, Trooper Wilson met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. "Miss Patterson is in an interview room down the hall," he explained. "I went to her residence this morning and asked about the fuel. She initially denied taking anything from your property, but when I mentioned we had video evidence, she changed her story." "Changed it how?" "She claimed that the Snowmachine was actually hers, and therefore the fuel was hers. She said you had been storing her property without permission." I felt my jaw drop. "That is insane. I have the title, the bill of sale, registration, everything. That Snowmachine is mine." I asked her to provide proof of ownership. She could not produce a title, bill of sale, or any documentation. She said all her paperwork was at her lawyer's office, which seemed suspicious. Then she said maybe she was confused and it was not her Snowmachine after all, but she still took the fuel because you were violating HOA rules. So she admitted to taking it. Eventually, yes. But here is where it gets more complicated. When I asked where the fuel was now, she said she had already used it in her own Snowmachine. I asked to see her Snowmachine, and she has a different model, an older Polaris. I checked her garage, and there were 2 fuel canisters there. I asked if I could check them, and she refused. That gave me enough for probable cause, so I obtained a verbal warrant from Judge Morrison over the phone and checked the canisters. They were both full of premium fuel, same grade you purchased. Can you prove it is mine? Not scientifically without expensive testing, but the circumstantial evidence is strong. She has no receipts for fuel purchased recently. The amount in her canisters is approximately 19 gallons, accounting for what she might have used, and we have video of her taking it from your property. I arrested her for theft in the 4th degree. In Alaska, I learned, theft in the 4th degree applied to stolen property valued between $50 and $250. 20 gallons of premium Snowmachine fuel in Fairbanks in winter ran about $6 per gallon, putting the total value around $120. It was a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail and a $10,000 fine, though first-time offenders rarely saw jail time. "What happens now?" I asked. "She is being processed. She will likely post bail today and be released with a court date. You will need to file a formal complaint and may be called as a witness. I also recommend documenting any other interactions you have had with her, especially regarding the HOA. This could be part of a pattern of harassment." I spent the next hour at the station, giving my formal statement and signing paperwork. Trooper Wilson made copies of my security footage and my fuel receipt. As I was finishing up, I saw Deborah in the hallway, being escorted by another trooper. She saw me and her face turned red. "This is ridiculous, Aaron. You are going to regret this. The HOA will make your life hell. We will fine you for every tiny violation until you are forced to sell." The trooper with her put a hand on her arm. "Miss Patterson, I advise you not to threaten Mr. Ellsworth." She pulled her arm away. "It is not a threat. It is a promise. He is violating at least a dozen HOA regulations, and as president it is my duty to enforce them." Trooper Wilson stepped forward. "Miss Patterson, any further contact with Mr. Ellsworth outside of official court proceedings could be considered harassment and could result in additional charges. I strongly suggest you let your lawyer handle all communications from this point forward." She glared at both of us but said nothing more. They led her away to finish processing, and I left the station feeling vindicated but also anxious. Deborah had essentially declared war, and I knew the HOA could make homeownership miserable if they wanted to. When I got home, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from the Pinewood Hills HOA, signed by Deborah Patterson, dated that very morning before Trooper Wilson had arrested her. The notice claimed I was in violation of 17 separate HOA regulations, ranging from the Snowmachine storage issue to the color of my mailbox, the height of my fence, and even the type of bird feeder I had in my backyard. Each violation carried a fine of $50 per day until corrected, and some of the alleged violations dated back months, meaning I supposedly owed thousands of dollars. I took photos of the notice and called a lawyer. I had never needed legal representation before, but this situation was escalating beyond what I could handle alone. I found an attorney named Robert Hastings who specialized in both property law and criminal defense. His office was in downtown Fairbanks, and he agreed to see me that afternoon. Robert was in his mid-50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested he did not miss much. I explained the entire situation, from the HOA disputes to the fuel theft to Deborah's arrest and her threat to bury me in fines. He listened carefully, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "HOA disputes in Alaska are interesting," he said when I finished. "We do not have as many as states like Florida or California, but when they happen, they can get ugly. The good news is that HOAs here have less power than in many other states. They cannot foreclose on your home for unpaid fines without going through a lengthy court process, and judges tend to be skeptical of HOAs that overreach. What about these fines she is trying to impose?" He looked over the notice. "Most of these are bogus. The Snowmachine storage rule she cited is not actually in your CC and Articus. I can almost guarantee it. I will need to review your HOA documents, but I suspect she is either making up rules or misinterpreting existing ones. As for the others, like your mailbox color and bird feeder, those are so petty that even if they are technically violations, no judge is going to uphold thousands of dollars in fines. Can we fight this? Absolutely. But more importantly, her threat today, witnessed by law enforcement, could be used to show this is harassment and retaliation. That actually works in your favor. We can argue she is abusing her position as HOA president to target you personally because you reported her crime. Over the next few days, Robert worked on preparing our response to the HOA while Trooper Wilson continued his investigation. It turned out Deborah had a history of complaints from other residents in Pinewood Hills. Marcus, my neighbor, reached out to tell me that at least 5 other homeowners had issues with Deborah's enforcement tactics. One couple had been fined for painting their house trim, a shade of blue that Deborah claimed was not on the approved color list, even though they had gotten written approval from the HOA board before painting. Another resident had been cited for parking an RV on his property, even though the CC and Articus specifically allowed RVs to be parked in driveways. I started reaching out to these other homeowners, and we formed a group chat. There was Marcus, a software engineer who worked from home like me. There was Linda and George Morrison, the couple with the blue trim issue. There was Tom Raid, the RV owner, and there was Janet Hughes, an older woman who had been fined for having a vegetable garden in her front yard that Deborah claimed was unsightly. We met at Linda and George's house one evening, about a week after Deborah's arrest. Their home was cozy and warm, a refuge from the cold darkness outside. We sat around their dining room table with coffee and cookies, sharing our stories. She fined us $3,000 total, Linda said, her voice shaking with frustration. We paid because we were afraid of what would happen if we did not. Our lawyer said fighting it would cost more than just paying. I paid $800, Tom said. Same reason. It felt like extortion, but what could I do? Janet, who was in her 70s, looked close to tears. I am on a fixed income. I cannot afford the $1,500 she says I owe. I planted tomatoes and cucumbers because it saves me money on groceries. There is nothing in the rules that says I cannot have a garden. I felt anger rising in my chest. She is using the HOA as her personal fiefdom. This is not about maintaining property values or community standards. This is about power and control. Marcus nodded. The question is, what do we do about it? She is the president, and the other board members just go along with whatever she says. We vote her out, I said, and we elect a new board that will actually serve the community instead of terrorizing it. George shook his head. The next HOA election is not until April. That is 3 months away. She can do a lot of damage in 3 months. Robert, my lawyer, had given me some advice on this exact scenario before the meeting. Actually, according to your HOA bylaws, you can call a special election if you get signatures from 30% of the homeowners. How many houses are in Pinewood Hills? 43, Linda said. I helped with the directory last year. So you need 13 signatures to force a special election. There are 6 of us here. We need 7 more households. Over the next 2 weeks, we canvassed the neighborhood. It was hard work in the brutal cold, going door to door in the dark after most people got home from work. But we found that many residents had grievances with Deborah, even if they had not been directly fined. She had a reputation for being rude and condescending, for showing up unannounced to inspect properties, for sending nasty letters over minor issues. We got our 13 signatures in 10 days. Actually, we got 22. More than half the neighborhood wanted change. We submitted the petition to the HOA board, citing the relevant bylaw that allowed for special elections. Deborah, still out on bail and awaiting trial for the fuel theft, tried to reject the petition, claiming some of the signatures were invalid. But Robert reviewed them, and confirmed every single one met the requirements. A special election was scheduled for February 20th, about a month away. In the meantime, Deborah's criminal case was moving forward. Her court date for the theft charge was set for February 8th. I was subpoenaed to testify, and Trooper Wilson told me the prosecution was confident. They had video evidence, my testimony, the fuel canisters found in her garage, and her own contradictory statements. The week before her court date, something unexpected happened. I received a certified letter from Deborah's attorney. It was not about the HOA. It was a civil lawsuit. Deborah was suing me for defamation, claiming I had damaged her reputation by falsely accusing her of theft and by organizing the petition to remove her from the HOA board. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I called Robert immediately. He actually laughed when I read him the complaint. "This is a slap suit," he said. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She is trying to intimidate you into dropping the criminal charges and the HOA petition. It has no merit. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and you have video evidence that she took your fuel. Plus, organizing a petition is protected activity. We will get this dismissed, and we might even be able to countersue for frivolous litigation." Despite his confidence, the lawsuit rattled me. I had never been sued before. The idea that I could be dragged through court and potentially owe money for simply defending my property felt wrong on every level. The other homeowners in our group rallied around me. Marcus started a legal defense fund, and within 3 days, they had raised over $2,000 to help with my attorney fees. It was not much compared to what legal bills could be, but the gesture meant everything. I was not alone in this fight. February 8th arrived cold and clear. The court hearing was held at the Fairbanks District Court on 2nd Avenue. I arrived early, dressed in a suit, feeling nervous despite knowing I was in the right. Robert met me outside and walked me through what to expect. "This is just a preliminary hearing," he explained. "The prosecution will present their evidence, and the judge will decide if there is enough to proceed to trial or if Deborah should accept a plea deal. Your testimony will be brief." Inside the courtroom, I saw Deborah sitting with her lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Deborah wore a conservative dress and had her hair pulled back, trying to look respectable and sympathetic. She did not look at me. The prosecution went first, represented by Assistant District Attorney Sarah Chen. She was efficient and thorough, presenting the security footage, my testimony about the fuel, Trooper Wilson's testimony about finding the fuel canisters in Deborah's garage, and Deborah's own statements which contradicted each other. When it was my turn to testify, I was sworn in and took the stand. Sarah Chen asked me straightforward questions about discovering the theft, about the security camera footage, about my fuel purchase. Deborah's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to suggest that maybe I had given Deborah permission to take the fuel and then forgot, or that perhaps someone else had taken it, and Deborah had innocently purchased used fuel from a third party. His questions were weak, and I answered them calmly and honestly. The whole thing took less than 2 hours. At the end, the judge, a stern woman named Judge Patricia Delgado, reviewed her notes and spoke directly to Deborah. "Miss Patterson, the evidence against you is substantial. You were recorded on video taking fuel from Mr. Ellsworth's property without permission. You gave conflicting statements to law enforcement, and fuel matching the description of what was stolen was found in your possession. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" Deborah stood. "Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding. Mr. Ellsworth and I have had disputes through the HOA, and I believe he fabricated this situation to discredit me." Did you take fuel from his property on the night of January 20th? There was a long pause. Deborah looked at her lawyer, who gave a slight nod. I may have taken some fuel, but I believed I had a right to access property in my HOA community to check for violations. Judge Delgado's expression hardened. That is not how property rights work, Miss Patterson. You do not have the right to take someone's personal property, regardless of your position in the HOA. I am finding probable cause to proceed with this case. Your next court date will be March 15th for trial, unless you wish to discuss a plea agreement with the prosecution. After the hearing, Sarah Chen pulled me aside. Her lawyer will probably negotiate a plea deal. First-time offenders in property theft cases usually get probation, restitution, and community service. But given her attitude and the civil suit she filed against you, I am going to push for the maximum within reason. What does that mean? 60 days in jail, suspended upon completion of probation, full restitution for the fuel, community service, and a restraining order that prevents her from contacting you outside of official HOA business, and even then, only through a third party. It sounded fair to me, though part of me wanted her to face harsher consequences for what she had put me and others through. The HOA special election was scheduled for February 20th, 12 days after the court hearing. Our group had nominated 3 candidates to run against Deborah and the 2 board members who had enabled her behavior. Marcus was running for president. Linda Morrison was running for vice president. And Tom Reed was running for secretary. We had campaigned hard, sending emails to all residents, hosting a town hall meeting at the community center, and making our case for reform. The current board tried to fight back. Deborah sent out an email calling us troublemakers and claiming we wanted to eliminate all standards in the neighborhood, which was absurd. We did not want chaos. We wanted reasonable rules, fairly enforced, with respect for homeowners' rights. The election was held at the Pinewood Hills Community Center, a small building at the entrance to the subdivision. Voting was open from 3 to 8 in the evening to accommodate people's work schedules. I voted right at 3, then stayed to observe. By 6, the turnout was already over 50%, which was unheard of for HOA elections. People cared about this. At 8, the votes were counted by a neutral third party we had hired, an accountant named Patricia who had no stake in the outcome. The results were decisive. Marcus won the presidency with 68% of the vote. Linda won vice president with 71%. Tom won secretary with 65%. It was a landslide. Deborah showed up right as the results were being announced. Her face went pale, then red. This election is invalid. The petition was improper. I am still the legal president. Patricia, the accountant, held up her clipboard. I have verified that all procedures were followed according to your bylaws. This election is valid. I will sue. I will challenge this in court. Robert, who had also come to observe, stepped forward. Miss Patterson, you are currently facing criminal charges and a criminal trial in 3 weeks. You also have a civil lawsuit against Mr. Ellsworth that is frivolous and will likely be dismissed. I strongly advise you to accept this result and step down gracefully before you make your legal situation worse. She looked around at all the faces watching her, neighbors who had voted her out, people who were tired of her bullying. Something in her seemed to break. Her shoulders sagged. Fine. You people deserve whatever happens to this neighborhood. She left without another word. I actually felt a little sorry for her in that moment, despite everything. She had clearly wrapped her entire identity in being HOA president, and now that was gone. The new board held their first meeting the following week. One of their first acts was to rescind all the fines that Deborah had issued over the past year. including the absurd 17 violations she had tried to pin on me. They also voted to refund money to homeowners like Linda, George, and Tom, who had already paid unjust fines. It was not legally required, but it was the right thing to do, and the budget could handle it. They also reviewed the CC and Articus and clarified several rules that Deborah had been misinterpreting. Snow machines were explicitly allowed to be stored in garages. RVs could be parked on properties as long as they were not derelict. Front yard gardens were permitted as long as they were maintained. Mailbox colors just had to be neutral tones, which gave homeowners plenty of options. March 15th came quickly. Deborah's trial was scheduled, but the day before, Robert called to tell me she had accepted a plea deal. The terms were close to what Sarah Chen had outlined. 60 days in jail, fully suspended, meaning she would not serve time unless she violated probation. 2 years of probation. Full restitution to me for the fuel, which came to $118 plus fees. 100 hours of community service. And a restraining order that prohibited her from contacting me directly for any reason. There was one additional term that surprised me. As part of her probation, she was required to attend anger management classes and complete a course on conflict resolution. The judge had apparently noted that this crime seemed to stem from an inability to handle disputes appropriately, and she wanted to address the root cause. I never saw Deborah again after the election night. She sold her house in April and moved away from Fairbanks entirely. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had taken a job in Anchorage and was living in an apartment, far away from any HOA. The civil defamation lawsuit she had filed against me was dismissed in May. The judge ruled it was indeed a slap suit with no merit, and he ordered Deborah to pay my attorney fees, which came to $4,500. Combined with the fundraising from my neighbors, I actually came out slightly ahead financially, though I donated the excess to a local charity. Life in Pinewood Hills improved dramatically under the new HOA board. Marcus turned out to be an excellent president, focused on actual community building rather than petty enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, improved the common areas, and handled genuine issues like snow removal and road maintenance. When disputes arose, they were addressed with communication and compromise rather than fines and threats. I got my snow machine refueled and finally took that trip to my ice fishing spot. The machine ran perfectly, gliding across the frozen landscape under the northern lights. It was mid-March by then, and the days were getting longer, the sun returning after the dark winter. Spring was coming to Alaska, bringing with it renewal and hope. One evening in late April, I was sitting on my front porch, enjoying the relatively warm weather, around 30 degrees, when Marcus stopped by. He had a 6-pack of local Alaskan beer and a grin on his face. "Thought you might want to celebrate," he said, handing me a bottle. "Celebrate what? 100 days without a single fine being issued to anyone in the neighborhood." I checked the records. In the 3 years before we took over, Deborah issued an average of 12 fines per month. We have issued 0. We clinked bottles and sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. It would not fully set tonight, just graze the edge of the world and come back up. The midnight sun was approaching. "You ever regret moving here?" Marcus asked. "With everything that happened, I mean." I thought about it. The cold, the darkness, the isolation, and yes, the nightmare of dealing with Deborah and the HOA. But I also thought about the community that had rallied around me, the beauty of the landscape, the sense of accomplishment in standing up for what was right. "Not for a second," I said. The legal aftermath continued for a few more months, mostly just paperwork and formalities. Deborah completed her community service at a homeless shelter in Anchorage. According to the probation reports that became public record, she actually did well there, showing a different side of herself when she was not in a position of power over others. Maybe the anger management classes helped. Maybe losing everything gave her perspective. I did not know, and I tried not to spend too much time thinking about it. The fuel restitution check arrived in June, along with a mandated letter of apology that her lawyer had clearly written. It was generic and formal, but I accepted it. Holding on to anger would not serve me. The summer in Fairbanks was glorious. The midnight sun meant endless daylight for outdoor activities. I took my snow machine out of storage and did maintenance on it, getting it ready for next winter. I joined Marcus and some other neighbors for hiking trips in Denali National Park. Linda and George invited me to their 4th of July barbecue. Tom helped me build a new shed in my backyard, properly permitted and approved by the new HOA board with zero hassle. In August, I started dating someone I met at a community event. Her name was Zara Daniels, and she was a teacher at one of the local elementary schools. She had heard about the HOA drama through mutual friends, and thought it was hilarious that I had accidentally become a neighborhood hero by fighting back against an overzealous HOA president. "You are like the suburban version of David versus Goliath," she teased me over coffee one morning. "Except Goliath was stealing your snow machine fuel." It sounds ridiculous when you put it that way. It is ridiculous. That is what makes it great. You stood up to a bully and you won. Not enough people do that. By October, life had settled into a comfortable routine. The new HOA board was functioning smoothly. My freelance design work was going well. Zara and I were getting serious. The first snow of the season fell in early October, a light dusting that reminded everyone winter was coming. I was ready for it this time. My snow machine was fueled and maintained. My garage was stocked with supplies. I had a good community around me and a sense that I belonged here, truly belonged, in a way I had not felt before all the drama with Deborah. One afternoon in November, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Janet Hughes, the older woman who had been fined for her vegetable garden. She was buying seeds for next spring, planning ahead. "Aaron," she said, her face lighting up when she saw me, "I wanted to thank you again. I know I said it before, but I mean it. You saved us all from that woman." "I just stood up for myself," I said. "You all did the real work organizing and voting. You gave us permission to fight back. That matters." As I drove home, her words stayed with me. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept unfair treatment. One person saying, "No, this is not okay." That act of defiance can inspire others, can create momentum for change. The winter of my second year in Fairbanks was better than my first. The darkness did not bother me as much. The cold felt familiar rather than hostile. I had friends, a girlfriend, and a community that functioned the way it should. In December, the HOA board organized a holiday party at the community center. It was the first one in years. Deborah had apparently stopped doing them because she found them too much trouble. This party was warm and welcoming, with food, music, and genuine camaraderie. Kids ran around playing while adults talked and laughed. Marcus gave a short speech thanking everyone for their support during the transition and for helping create a real community. I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, people I had come to know and care about, and I felt grateful. Grateful that Deborah had stolen my fuel in a strange way, because that theft had been the catalyst for necessary change. If she had not escalated things to a criminal level, I might have just moved or suffered in silence. Instead, Her overreach had exposed her abuse of power and united the neighborhood against tyranny. Zara squeezed my hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Just appreciating how things worked out. Even the part where you got arrested by the HOA president." "She arrested herself, technically. I just provided the evidence." We laughed, and I grabbed us both some punch from the refreshment table. The new year came with goals and plans. Marcus wanted to add more community events. Linda proposed starting a neighborhood watch program, a real one focused on safety rather than code enforcement. Tom suggested creating a community garden where people could share plots and resources. These were the kinds of initiatives that actually built community value, unlike Deborah's reign of fines and fear. In February, I got a message from Trooper Wilson. He was following up on the case, making sure everything had been resolved to my satisfaction. I told him it had, and I thanked him for taking my complaint seriously and investigating thoroughly. "Part of the job," he said. "Though I will admit, I have worked plenty of HOA disputes that do not rise to criminal level. This one was clear-cut once we saw that video. Miss Patterson made it easy by not covering her tracks. You know how she is doing. I mean, I know about the probation terms, but beyond that. Last I heard, she was still in Anchorage, working as an office manager somewhere. She completed all her requirements early, actually. Anger management, conflict resolution, community service. Her probation officer said she was a model client. Sometimes people just need a hard reset." I hoped that was true. I did not wish her ill, despite what she had put me through. People could change, could learn, could become better versions of themselves when forced to confront their worst behaviors. Spring came again, my third in Alaska. Zara moved in with me in April, bringing her books and plants and laughter into my home. We talked about marriage, about building a life together in this strange and beautiful place. The HOA continued to thrive under Marcus's leadership. Property values in Pinewood Hills actually increased, which was ironic given Deborah's constant claims that her strict enforcement was necessary to maintain values. Turns out people preferred living in a community where they were treated with respect rather than suspicion. In May, I finally met the new family that had bought Deborah's old house. They were young, in their late 20s, with a toddler and a dog. The husband, Kevin, worked on the North Slope oil fields, 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. The wife, Rachel, was a nurse at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. They were friendly and excited to be part of the neighborhood. "We heard there was some drama with the previous owner," Rachel said as we chatted over her fence one afternoon. "But everyone says the HOA is great now." "It is," I confirmed. "Very reasonable people running it. You should not have any problems as long as you do not paint your house neon pink or start a junkyard in your front lawn." She laughed. "I think we can manage that." Time moved on, as it does. Seasons cycled. Winters came and went. The Snowmachine never had fuel stolen again, though I did upgrade my security system just to be safe. I took regular trips out to remote areas, ice fishing and exploring, embracing the Alaska lifestyle I had moved here for. Marcus served 2 terms as HOA president, then stepped down to let others lead. Linda took over, and she was equally good at the job. The neighborhood had learned its lesson. Power needed to be distributed, rotated, and checked. No one person should have unchallenged authority over others. I sometimes wondered if Deborah ever thought about Pinewood Hills, about the community she had tried to control and the way it had rejected her. Did she have regrets? Did she understand why what she did was wrong? I would probably never know. What I did know was that standing up to her had changed my life for the better. It had forced me to engage with my community, to build relationships, to fight for what was right. Those were valuable lessons, even if they came through conflict. Zara and I got married in June of the following year, a small ceremony at a lodge just outside Denali National Park with friends and neighbors in attendance. Marcus was my best man. Janet brought a cake she had made herself using vegetables from her front yard garden, which was now flourishing and admired by everyone. The HOA had even featured it in their newsletter as an example of how personal touches could enhance neighborhood character. At the reception, people told stories, including the infamous fuel theft incident. It had become neighborhood legend, the story of how a petty tyrant overreached and brought about her own downfall. Tom joked that they should put up a historical marker at my garage. On this spot, Karen faced consequences for her actions. We all laughed, but there was truth in the humor. Accountability mattered, consequences mattered, and communities needed to stand together against those who abused power, no matter how small that power might seem. Years passed. I continued my life in Fairbanks, working, loving, being part of something bigger than myself. The HOA became what it should have been all along, a service organization that maintained common areas and handled practical matters without drama or overreach. I never saw Deborah again, and I was okay with that. Our paths had crossed in conflict, served their purpose, and diverged. She was a chapter in my story, not the whole book. On quiet winter nights when the northern lights danced overhead and the temperature dropped to brutal lows, I sometimes thought about that morning when I discovered my fuel tank empty. How angry I had been, how violated I had felt, and how that violation had led to justice, to community, to positive change. Life had a funny way of working out. Bad situations could lead to good outcomes if you handled them right. Standing up for yourself mattered. Demanding accountability mattered. And sometimes, just sometimes, the system actually worked the way it was supposed to. My snow machine sat in my garage, maintained and ready, fuel tank full and secure. No one would steal from it again, not because I had better security, though I did, but because the person who would have stolen from it was gone, and the community that remained knew better than to tolerate that kind of behavior. Fairbanks, Alaska had become my true home, not just a place I lived, but a place I belonged. And that belonging had been earned through conflict, through standing up to wrong, through demanding better from those in positions of authority. The HOA Karen who stole fuel from my snow machine had been arrested when she could not prove ownership. Justice had been served. The community had been healed. And life, in all its messy, complicated beauty, had moved on to better things. I would not have chosen to go through what I went through, but I also would not change it. Because it made me who I was, connected me to people I cared about, and taught me that fighting for what is right, even in small ways, even against seemingly petty injustices, truly mattered. And on cold Alaska nights, that knowledge kept me just as warm as any fire.